First Class Fatherhood. That is where Alec Lace comes in with his popular podcast.
And one of the most interesting was on a podcast.
Alec Lace interviews high-profile fathers from actors to NFL players with a vision to change the narrative of fatherhood and family life.
Joining me now, First Class Father Greg Paul. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Hey, thanks for having me. You're doing great stuff.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's start like this. How many kids do you have? How old are they?
I have two boys, Logan and Jake Paul. They're 25 and 27 years old.
Yeah, you know, some of my listeners may have heard about them. So let's get a little bit about you. Tell the listeners here a little bit about your background, Paul. Mr. Paul.
Greg. We'll go with Greg or GP.
All right.
So, by the way, the Paul switch reversal thing happens a lot. I mean, people I've known for years are like, "Hey, Paul, good to see you." I'm like, "Yeah, it's Greg." You know. So, a little bit about me. I had older brother, younger brother growing up. Mom and dad divorced in third grade. Dad was in and out of my life when he was around. Great dad, hands-on, crazy smart, but he was too smart for society. He couldn't handle a job because he's got a partial photographic memory and he can read upside down. He's really smart. So he'd get a job or he'd do something and he'd see people screwing up and he'd tell them how to fix it or make it better. And they didn't like it, and they didn't. So he was always unemployed. But he's an artist. He was able to make money. So grew up. Mom was heavily involved. But growing up, I was kind of a pain in the ass. I was a troublemaker. I was a hard kid to deal with, and I was a middle child and a redhead. So so that was part of how we grew up. And aunts and uncles. My grandma was a very big part of my life. Very influential. My uncles were around, and thank God for them because they were a huge male influence in my life that you don't know you need until later down the road.
Yeah, that's one thing I do talk about on this show a lot, Greg, is the fatherless crisis and the importance of, if you don't have a father, finding that father figure. So many kids can either find that in a coach or in a teacher or maybe in the military with an instructor. And some people, they find it in the street. And that's the reason why we're filling up our prison systems in this country with fatherless kids.
Absolutely. It's huge. And, with the divorce rate at 50%, I applaud all the women that are trying to play both roles. But a woman's just not going to fill that role no matter how hard she tries. It's just not going to happen. I think the kids, the males, the girls and the boys need that father figure, that male role model, wherever they get it from, on a consistent basis, not from the new boyfriend or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's never a slight on single moms that are out there. I always make that point, Greg, to make sure I say that. I've heard a lot of single moms say, "Well, I don't need a man," and that may be true, but your kid does, and that's the whole point that we're trying to make here. So, and how did it turn around for you then? Take me back to the beginning of your fatherhood journey. How old were you when you became a dad, and how did that shift your perspective on life?
Okay, so when I was growing up, when I was 18, I was a realtor. 19 years old, I was a realtor. Started selling real estate, and even when I was a young kid, there was a newspaper article that was written by a gal named Dear Abby. The older folks will remember it. Younger ones won't. Dear Abby would always give advice. I would read that column to get advice on life because I didn't have anybody to go to. And when I started selling real estate, I was closely watching the parents that were doing a good job and the parents that weren't. And the parents that were doing a good job with the kids, I'd ask them, "What are you doing?" And over time, it became very clear that they were very consistent. Although none of them knew each other, what they did with their children was very consistent. So I decided to model that, decided to use it with my kids. And that was, and as every dad knows, as soon as you touch your first kid, your life changes, like immediately, so that was part of it. And I can go into some of the things I did, but I don't know which way you want to go with this.
Well, I got to say, I mean, obviously you've done something right here. I mean, your boys are obviously a massive success. They've accumulated such an amazing just presence on social media in our culture now. They've really, it seems like everything they touch turns to gold. And I got to imagine as a father, how proud you must be of them. How was that watching their journey of from where they started, I guess, maybe putting up their first videos to where they are now? What was that like for you to watch them go through that? And what was your part in it?
So, My part started at a very young age with my kids. And I tell people this, and a lot of people don't like it, but I say this: if you can train a dog, you can train your kids. And some people are like, oh, that's no good, blah, blah. Listen, we all need training. You and I, both as adults, are still getting training in life, right? So with my kids, I had consistent rules. They were doing their own laundry at 10 years old. They both dropped their first deer with a muzzleloader at 10 years old. They could both build a fire with one match at 10 years old. I had my kids working. And by the way, we grew up in a wealthy community. I happened to buy a house and a piece of property before the community blew up. But if you lived in Cleveland and you lived on the west side and you were like an Indians player, Browns, baseball, professional level, you lived in the community we lived in. I'm sharing that because a lot of the kids they went to school with, they'd get a car as soon as they turned 16. My boys didn't get that. They didn't get an allowance. They had to work. And, things like they weren't allowed to say can't. When I coached football, if one of the kids said, I can't do this, I'd make them stand. And I learned this from being in the military. And I'd make the rest of the team run. And when the rest of the team was running because Timmy said can't, the rest of the team put so much pressure on him, he stopped saying can't. And if somebody dropped an F-bomb, the guy that dropped the F-bomb, I'd make him stand and the team would run. I only had to do that 1 or 2 times. So the same thing with the house. We had household rules. And they were like that because, let's say one of my friends came over and their kids were spoiled little punks and they would be doing crappy bullshit. I'd say, listen, that's not acceptable in this house. We have household rules that apply to everybody in the house. So you might be able to do whatever you do at your mom's house or your dad's house, but that's not acceptable here. And I think that's where a lot of parents fail, is that the rules get to be broken down in different locations or because of different people. I was consistent in my rules. They knew what the expectation was. Please, thank you, appreciate you. When they started dating, I'd go, make sure you meet the mom and dad. You have to go in the house, shake their hand, give them a firm handshake. And so from watching, doing the real estate interviewing, I actually started writing notes for myself before my kids were born as to what to remember to do. And once I knew I was having a child, I actually wrote a 9-page letter to my unborn child, at the time not knowing if I was having a boy or girl. And the purpose of that was, so 12, 13, 14, 15 years later, I had a better idea what it was like for me to be young. And when Logan was 15, he was getting really shitty, giving me attitude. Like most kids, they think dad doesn't know anything. So I said, Logan, you know what? I knew this day would come. I said, before you were born, I wrote a letter to my unborn child, not knowing if it was a boy or girl. Let me share some notes with you. And in the notes, I said, when you're 15 to 17 years old, you will become cocky. You will become a know-it-all. You will think you're big, you're 7 feet tall and bulletproof. So I wrote it to him. I handed it to him. It was sealed. He opened it up. I made copies in case he was enough of a punk, or she was, that they tore it up. So I made copies. And Logan, like 15 minutes later, Logan's like, comes downstairs. He goes, when did you write this? And I go, I told you when I wrote it. He goes, no. When did you actually write it? I said, I'll call your mom right now. And I was divorced at the time. I said, I'll call your mom right now. Put her on the phone. So I called up. I said, hey, Pam, do you remember me doing something before the kids were born regarding an envelope? She goes, yeah. And I go, you're on speakerphone with Logan. Tell him what it was. So she told him. And I had to pull that letter out a couple different times for Logan and a couple different times for Jake. But it gave me credibility. So
that's incredible, Greg. And I know that just from having my 2 oldest right now are 16 and 15. They're right there in that the whole stage. They're going through it. And then I have my younger ones that are 11 and 8. So they're the kind of different philosophy applies to both of them as far as it goes. When I'm disciplining them, they're going through different stages. But I know just from my younger son, he's interested in he's starting a YouTube channel and getting into it. And I try to tell them, my older ones, when they started doing it, like, listen, there's more to this than just turning on the phone, fooling around and posting. Like and I've learned it just over the last few years doing this stuff. There's a lot of work that goes into this, a lot of consistency, a lot of skill sets. So there's so much more into this than there is of just like, it looks like just turn the phone on and start fooling around. But your kids have gone from that now. What is your take on them getting into the boxing world? I know this weekend Your son is fighting, I mean, an MMA legend in Anderson Silva. What was it like for you? Where did the boxing stuff come from? Is that something that you got them into as young? Was that always in them, or did that just come out of thin air?
So I'm going to back up a little bit because you had asked about how they get started. One of the things about these guys is they are consistent. A lot of the younger kids that want to get into it, they think they're going to turn on the camera and make it work. Jake did 550 daily vlogs in a row. Didn't miss one. You know what you're doing. You're doing on a consistent. It's a lot harder. And here's where kids will succeed today. Everybody's like, oh, how do you keep motivated? It's not motivation. It's discipline. They need to wake up and do it every day. I work my ass off. There's not a man my age who will outwork me anywhere. It does not exist. And my boys, Logan and Jake, they outwork everybody in the room because I had them working from a young age. And so the boxing thing, I grew up with a wrestling family. I did a little bit of MMA and some judo and jiu-jitsu in high school with some friends of mine. And then as I got older, I met a buddy who was a third-degree black belt. He was building a gym. I helped him build out the gym, and we basically bartered. I'm like, hey, Paul, just train me. Let me work out. We did that. My boys started doing it. And then they were great athletes in high school. Again, always working. And then Logan and Jake had a boxing match against another YouTuber in the KSI, named KSI in the UK. So KSI fought somebody in the UK. Then he called out Logan and Jake. Jake said, hey, KSI has a younger brother. Why don't we do a dual fight? Logan fights the older brother. I fight the younger brother. It'll be the UK against the US. And that's kind of how it started.
Amazing stuff. And your kids, man, they're just brilliant marketers. What they've been able to build up and do, it's really inspiring stuff to watch. Yeah. So it's incredible. And I'm sure that you must be so proud of us. But also what comes with that is the negative side of this now, Greg. I mean, also we're seeing, I know just from doing this, when I put out certain interviews with certain guys, I get just lambasted on social media. I know your boys have faced that. What is it like for you as a dad to have to sit there and watch some of the crap that comes at them from all over the place now that they are out there and they are popular and they are, in the popular culture?
So I'll tell you, when Logan was in Japan, he did this. I don't know if you remember, but he went into what's called the Suicide Force to do a video. And their plan was to do an overnight haunted stay in the Suicide Force. And in Japan, people go to this place and apparently hang themselves. It's kind of a common thing. Well, they went into the force and there's a guy hanging. Logan filmed them. And Logan always had this nervous laugh where he'd be like, and in football, his coach would be yelling at him and he'd go, and I go, and the coach would just blow up on him, be like, what are you laughing about? Don't you be laughing. Logan's like, I'm not laughing. So when he did the Suicide Force thing, he did that nervous laugh and it literally blew up. The world hated him overnight. I ended up getting probably, and this is no exaggeration, 10,000 hate texts, emails, things like that. My phone was literally just blowing up for about 18 hours straight. My ex-wife called me up, bawling her eyes out. I'm getting off. I'm removing everything, all this crap. I'm like, no, don't. And I said, Jake, what do we do? Jake goes, don't worry about it. In 4 days, I'll move on to somebody else. It's the way cancel culture works. But I felt that pain. I felt that hurt. I felt all the stuff. As a result of that, I've been coaching other people that do it. And the biggest thing is this: don't give in, don't cave. They will move on. And if you give them any fuel to the fire, they dig in harder. So being a part of their success, and it's the hard part is that early on, everybody has a target on them for quick money. And their part is in Hollywood. In my opinion, Hollywood's armpit of the world. Managers will call moms or dads that get involved. They call them momagers or dadagers. And they strongly discourage us being involved because they know that we truly have their best interest. And they don't like that because then they can't make their money. They can't get their friend to come in the deal. They're not able to skim get 10% off of 12 different people. So it was hard. And at one point, Jake's monthly expenses were like $290,000 a month. And it was just crazy because he was spending $700,000 on security. He didn't even know it because he was so busy making money. And I go and talk to his business managers. And I'm like, why do we have this? Why do we have two security guards with guns walking around the property when two people breached his property while they were there. So I actually quit what I was doing in Cleveland and went and saved Jake. I rescued him. I fired everybody. It was crazy. And now they're in a better place. They're still, they've experienced losses. They're maturing, but they still want to try to listen to people around them. And the people around them like that because they know that I'm always going to service my kids with the best intent.
Yeah, well, you know what's important too, Greg. You say he's still learning. We're all, like you said earlier on, and we were talking. You're still training. You're still learning. I mean, I think if you stop doing that, you're in a lot of trouble. And I think even from interviewing guys like, I mean, hell, even like Jocko Willing, I had him on the show. He's a guy that'll tell you, hey, I'm still learning. He has people that he listens to. So if a guy like that is doing it, there's no reason why you shouldn't be. But I know that one of the things that destroys a lot of people is when the fame does happen and it does blow up on them. They're not equipped to handle what's coming at them from all these different angles. And one of them is the financial situation, because we do such a piss poor job in this country of teaching kids financial literacy as they're coming through the pipeline. They have virtually no idea how to invest, how to value a dollar. So it's like they start from behind the eight ball, and then all of a sudden now they got more money than they could think of. And it really puts them in handcuffs where you think, oh, I have all this money, I can do what I want now. Very quickly, that money all goes back into the same pockets.
It really does. And the other part is, like Jake didn't finish his senior year in high school. He came out to Hollywood. He was living with Logan. We made him finish through online schooling. And the only reason Disney hired Jake because they interviewed him, they were going to get him for the job, all this stuff. And they said, hey, we need to see a diploma. So we were able to send him an actual recognized online schooling diploma for him to work with Disney, which really started to launch. But it's also hard because you're in Hollywood and, where we lived in Cleveland, we had a good sized house, good sized lot. We're in the upper echelon of the neighborhood, so to speak. We come out to Hollywood at 18 years old, women, cars, choppers, all the stuff and money. They literally were losing their head. And it was happening so fast that, I've said to people, I go, man, if I was 18 years old and at my time when I was younger like that, and I had all the money and all the stuff they had at the same time, I probably would have been found dead with lines of blow, alcohol, all the bullshit that we were doing. And they didn't do that. And it was a struggle and it was tough. But all that started with the foundation. They didn't see me drinking and partying a lot, so it was tough, man. I mean, it was hard. And I would tell anybody, if you got your kids going to Hollywood, do the best you can to stay in their life, because they're going to push you out. Eventually they're going to come around, but it's still hard. And they're making a shit ton of money, but they've lost a shit ton of money listening to the wrong people.
Yeah, that'll make you listen and grow up real quick, I guess, when that starts happening. So what about as far as this the fight this weekend here? What are you gonna? I would imagine you're gonna be there live. Jake's fighting Anderson Silva. What's your take on the fight? What can we expect to see here?
So, it's definitely Jake's toughest fight. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but there's a picture online with Jake and Logan with Anderson Silva when they were like 10 and 11 years old.
Incredible, yeah.
That was in Cleveland. That was a fight that we helped set up. So to see Jake fighting someone like Anderson absolutely blows my mind. And it's kind of crazy because these guys keep doing things that blow my mind. When Jake fought Tyrone Woodley in Cleveland, Logan and I were below the elevator when Jake was walking out. And all of our families in the stands. And Logan goes, Dad, is this real or is this a movie? I go, no shit, Logan. We used to get pay-per-views and all the people in the stands were in my house watching Tyrone, and we're eating pizza and having a good time in a sleepover. And now we're in a stadium filled in Cleveland watching Jake fight Tyrone. Like you couldn't make it up. So I think Jake's going to knock Anderson out. He's never fought a southpaw, but he works his ass off. He's gotten a lot faster. But Anderson is still dangerous. I mean, I told Jake, I said, listen, with Anderson Silva, if there's 7 seconds left, that fight is not over. He doesn't quit until the end or he stopped. And so I think it's going to be an exciting fight. I'm going to be front row. I'm nervous as hell, though, because I know Anderson is a badass. You know?
Yeah, that's for sure, man. I can't imagine what that must be like for you, especially watching where you just came from to where you are now. It's so awesome to watch your guys' story, and I know the sky's the limit for your kids in their future and what they're what they're going to do from this point going forward. And I would say this: if you were out in Vegas this weekend and you had to put a bet down on one or the other, who gives you the first grandkid here, Jake or Logan?
Oh man. I think it's going to be Logan.
All right.
I think it's going to be Logan. And, you know, I'm looking forward to being grandpa. You know, I'm definitely looking forward to that. But yeah, it's good stuff. But, you know, I want to come back to the whole thing with the fatherhood thing. There are a lot of dads that say they can't be involved in their life because of their wife, their ex-wife, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to call all those dads out that are saying that. You're a liar or you're spineless. One of the two. Nothing should keep you from your kids. And if your spouse is getting away, you guys reach out to me. If you're having problems getting connected with your kid, you want to do it, reach out to me. I will help you through it. And I've done this for people. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll say, listen, I'm not going to charge anything, but if I get you going, you give me what you think is fair. And there's no excuse. Your kids need you in your life. And I took a huge pay cut. I was a primary caregiver for my boys. I had them a week at a time. I took a huge pay cut to be in their life. I passed out on a shit ton of dating and women to be with my boys, to be at their sporting events, to get them jobs, get them working. And now it's there, and anybody can duplicate it. Anybody can do it. And here's another thing I want to mention, and I know we didn't talk about, but when parents are giving their kids phones, those kids need to know that that phone is the parent's phone. It is never the kid's phone. And the minute the kid says, give me my phone, you turn that phone off. And every parent has an excuse of why they think their kid needs a phone. That's bullshit. That's you being lazy. Shut their phone off. The minute they get shitty, shut their phone off. If your kids are getting crappy with you, guess what? You take the door off their bedroom until their behavior changes. It happens really quick. So
yeah, two points on that there, Greg, too. I'm seeing that. I mean, it's almost like a drug withdrawal when you take away a teenager's phone. I mean, it is a very, very high level addiction when they're playing with these phones now. And it's kind of, and I noticed myself getting even more addicted to it too. So that makes the social media, I mean, not the social media, but the phone technology even that much more difficult, because I find myself not living the example that I should be, because everything I do is locked into this phone as well. So I'm staring at the screen a little bit more than I should be as well. So hard to set that precedent. And the other thing you were talking about there too, when I talk about the fatherless crisis, one of the major contributing factors to this is the family court system in this country, which in a world where we want everything to be equal, it is not equal as far as moms and dads are concerned. They throw dads under the bus, and that's where they start from when it comes to most of these. And if I get one email more than the other, it's always from a dad telling me his story about how he's doing everything possible to get some type of custody, some type of time with his kids, but the ex is making it impossible for him. He's financially strapped. He's humiliated. He's going through it. He's trying to stay with it, but he's so discouraged. And that's where we're losing so many dads that won't do, like you said, you got to give up whatever you have to do. You have to sacrifice whatever it is to stay in your kids' lives.
So when I started dating, the first gal I dated, after my ex ended up having an affair and left, and it was really hard on me. But after I got my head together and I started dating again, the gal I went out with, I said, listen, I got to tell you something. My boys are my number one priority all the time. It's never negotiable. I said, the week I have them, they're definitely number one. If I don't have them, the week I don't have them, I said, you can be number one. Your dog can be number two. My dog will be number three. I'll be number four. I'm fine. But if my kids need me, you're immediately bumped to number two, and it's not a question. It's not negotiable. And they go, oh my God, I love that. I love that. And one gal fell in love with me, and 6 months in, she's like, this isn't going to work. And I go, why? She goes, because you're doing everything you said. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, I hear men say all the time their kids are a priority, but very few actually do it. She goes, you're doing it and you're living it. And I got to tell you, when you first told me, I didn't think you would do it because most men don't. She said, but I don't want to be second. And I said, okay, cool. I appreciate that. I understand it. You know, I'm here for you, but we're done. So then the second gal I went out with told her the same thing. She's like, oh, that's all good. Guess what? She fell in love with me too. And I'm not bragging. I'm just a good dude, and I work hard and I make it happen. I was about my kids. And I think me being about my kids was a high attraction for a lot of these women. But my point about that story is I sacrificed my love, my vacations, my whatever for my boys, and everybody knew it. Nobody can question it. And that's hard to do. So along the phone things, one of the things I would do is when we had dinner, no phones, no TV. We could have a stereo on, but we'd always do, hey, one good thing today. And if we had friends over, we'd all do it. We like, tell us one good thing that happened today. It doesn't have to be with you, something you saw, something happened, blah, blah. And the kids would love it. And I would have some kids go, hey, Mr. Paul, can I go again? You know, another thing is to bring the family together. And this might sound crazy. If you don't have a garden, grow a garden. Grow a garden with your kids because they will see growth. They will see that we planted something, we invested time, and out of it, something popped up. And then out of that, something grew that we could eat. And then we took that thing that we picked off the plant that we planted and we put it on our table and we're sharing the food. Gardens bring families together. And I know it might sound crazy, but it really does.
I love that, Greg, man. That's awesome stuff. And I want to move. I know I'm running up against my clock here, so I got to hit you with the last thing I love to ask all the dads. And you probably touched on this a little bit as you were talking here, but what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
A couple things: consistency, household rules. Don't say can't. Don't let your kids fail. Let them stumble. Let them fall. Let them experience what life is going to be about. With my kids, I'd be like, hey, welcome to life. Get the fuck over it. That's what I would tell them. And they didn't like it then, but now they love it. So, and just, you got to be there for your kids, man. Just never give up on them and let them grow.
Yeah, I love the message. Love your parenting philosophy here. This has been a pleasure for me. I got to say, GP, Greg Paul, you're a first-class father all the way. Thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
I appreciate you, man. Talk to you later.
You have been listening to First Class Fatherhood. First Class Fatherhood is a family-made media podcast. Please visit www.firstclassfatherhood.com or www.familymade.com to find out more details. You can order First Class Fatherhood advice and wisdom from high-profile dads on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Proverbs 22:6 tells us, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will never depart from it. God bless, and I'll catch you next time.